Of course, less than a week from now, the U.S. elections will be, completed. Voting will have been completed, but will we have a result? And will both parties accept the result? Something we're going to be talking about a little bit later in the program is some of the social fallout of what is happening in the United States at the moment, but looking at things from a spiritual perspective. Joining me on the program, Rev Dr Stuart Lange, National Director of the New Zealand Christian Network. Stuart, kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora.
Firstly, neither of us have skin in the game. We're not going to get a partisan or a political on this one, but it's an interesting situation where faith and spirituality is a consideration for many of the people that will be voting in the upcoming US election.
Yeah, it's got religious connotations and implications in an American context, way beyond what's normal in New Zealand. And both Harris and Trump, I just call them that, I'm not being rude, it's just for brevity.
Yeah.
Both Harris and Trump have Christian connections, and both would identify broadly as Christians.
Yeah.
And yet the rhetoric of it all is categorizing the other as the worst possible thing.
Yeah, I mean,
politically, spiritually, democratically, whatever.
Exactly, and apocalyptically even. There are comments
apocalyptic. It's a fight between evil and good.
Yeah.
And whichever one losers will say that, this is doomsday.
Yeah, exactly. And scriptures being taken out of context, etc. And it has got down to that level, especially with some Christians in the United States. Some are saying, well, this person is God's chosen agent for the next period of time, for such a time as this, and all of that good stuff from Esther. And other people are saying that the person that they're not voting for is the Antichrist, and that this, if they do become the president, that this will usher in the end times, as we read in the book of Revelation. I mean, it's quite extreme viewpoints on this one, and both coming from groups of people, again, purporting to be Christians, to be followers of Jesus.
Yeah, it's extremely polarized rhetoric, and probably not that helpful. I mean, whoever wins, there'll be some people disappointed with some of the policy directions and some of the actions, but probably none of what they're saying. It's all extreme rhetoric in a heated election, and it's probably quite overstated right round. And I just would perhaps make the point that, obviously Mr. Trump makes a strong play for the support of evangelicals, and speaks of Harris as anti-Christian. I mean, he appointed Supreme Court justice people who overturned, the abortion situation. But his own Christian faith is not that obvious.
Not demonstrated by his lifestyle, some would say.
Well, no, but in terms of his articulation of faith, he seems to avoid that. Though he makes Christian-friendly utterances.
Yeah.
And is obviously his lifestyle, but is not consistently Christian. And just biblical values like compassion, kindness, forgiveness, gentleness, and respect don't appear to feature strongly in his approach. Now, he would say, well, this is a situation that requires strong language, and I'm making a stand for good and for righteousness and so on. But there are different ways of doing that. And on the other hand, Harris is not. Some of her views may be anti-Christian, but she's not herself anti-Christian, it would appear. I mean, it's a mixed picture again. Raised by a Hindu mother, raised in the black church. Her mother sent her to a black church.
Mm-hmm.
She identifies as Christian. She says she prays at least daily.
Yeah.
And she seeks prayer from her pastor, whom she's in touch with often.
Yeah.
She attends church sometimes. And she has a husband who appears to be a practicing Jew to at least some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But the cast of her faith is an emphasis on loving your neighbor and social justice. She spoke in a Baptist church from the pulpit. She actually preached on the Good Samaritan.
Mm-hmm.
But she's liberal on abortion and LGBTQ issues.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of both have good about them, both have not so good things. And we have the luxury here of not having to decide who we would vote for, because it's very complicated.
It is, but in some ways, it is a reflection of the diversity within Christendom as well. That Christians can look at both of these candidates and say, well, this one's obviously the more godly choice. Says something about the diversity in the body of Christ. I know that. I mean, you mentioned the evangelical community in America. It has perhaps been increasingly the case that regardless of who the Republican candidate is, there are key Christian leaders in the United States who say that it would be unchristian to not vote Republican, even though separation of church and state is a key part of their constitution. They haven't seemed to have got the details of that right, Stuart.
Well, there are other evangelicals who have said, well, you know, that the extreme adulation of Mr. Trump approaches idolatry, which doesn't go down well with everybody, of course.
Exactly. Yep.
But and the other point I want to make is that there are many evangelicals, you know, gospel-minded people who are black and Latino, who would support Harris as evangelical Christians. So we only sort of get from the media, which is dumbed down on all this. They talk about the white evangelicals, but it's almost a political thing there in the media, the way they portray it. But of course, there are gospel-minded people very much in the black church and the Latino church. So it's more complicated than the rhetoric on these matters,
and more complicated than single issues such as pro-life, which is an important issue. But one candidate, I suppose there is the clarity that one candidate they each have clear and distinct views on that, and they're campaigning on them. But perhaps Christian faith is broader than that one particular issue. Stuart, just as we're wrapping up, because just about out of time for today, as we mentioned earlier, we don't have a horse in the race, but what can we pray for the people of the United States?
Pray for a smooth transition to whoever is the president, because it's going to be a transition. There's a new president either way. And pray against violence, and pray for some a cranking back of the rhetoric, and for a more reconciling spirit somehow. I mean, we need that all over the world. Seems like the peacemakers are not doing too well in any context. Pray against violence, because it's extremely possible, and it's not in anybody's interests if whoever wins, if America kind of melts down. So we need to pray for the well-being of America. I mean, I can see good and bad in both candidates, and I'm sure most of us can. But even if we're strongly committed to either, I think we do want America not to have a meltdown, right? I think that's just would be appalling for the world. So pray for peace and for well, for peace, really.
Yeah. No, Stuart, we appreciate your wisdom and insight on this matter, and we'll plan to be praying for as we head towards the election. It'll be all over and done with, but hopefully a peaceful transition after that. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.